my name is Margaret Adele, and welcome to another indie book review. This is part of a long string of sci-fi stories that I've been getting in my inbox, and I'm really happy about it. So, today I am reviewing Around the Dark Dial by JD Sanderson. This is a short story collection based on those classic 1940s, 50s, maybe a little bit 60s radio dramas, think War of the Worlds. And the foreword and the synopsis both mentioned that this is supposed to be a mix of modern and classic storytelling, aka a mix of singular episodic stories a la The Twilight Zone, but also the more modern, serialized, long format. So basically, that means that there are some short stories that are completely their own thing, and some that are interconnected among one plotline. So the big plotline running through it that kind of pops in and out of the collection is a group of scientists going to explore this strange force field that has surrounded Yellowstone National Park. A long time ago, there was what was almost a supervolcanic eruption, and then this mysterious force field popped up around it, and no one's been able to get in, but they finally can. And so they're trying to get into it and figure out what happened, why is this here, and why is the force field starting to fade. So it was a really intriguing idea, and I liked kind of where it was going moving forward. The cast was pretty small, as you could kind of assume for a series of short stories all interconnected. As a result, though, those particularly didn't feel like short stories. They felt like mini chapters. And at one point, there might have been a little bit too much information being given for even multi-short story plot. A lot of just exposition at the end to explain things. But I did like the build-up at least. As for the other stories in the collection, they definitely had that creepy radio drama ambiance. They were very dark. Most of them had outright dystopian endings, or endings that, while not directly horrible, ending in death, still vaguely alluded to things going down the tubes later. Very much that whole humanity is awful, we're awful, everything is going to be awful. Which, just a super fun mindset to have in 2022. Like, yeah, I get it, things have been horrible, but I need some hope in my sci-fi. Regardless, a lot of it was very classic stuff. To be honest, while, again, both the synopsis and the foreword talk about this mashup of classic and modern, for me, it definitely leaned more towards the classic than anything else. The vast majority of the tropes and plot points within this collection were very standard sci-fi tropes. Things like the robot that decides that humanity is worthless and that it is superior to them, or the fact that any aliens brought up are universally more advanced than humans and beyond humans, and they've somehow gotten beyond, their issues magically. Like, that kind of classic stuff, the humans are always stupid sci-fi, which I don't know that I'm the biggest fan of, because I always like to think that robots and aliens would probably also get into stupid fights. Because I feel like if you have any kind of society where people can have different beliefs, you're gonna have stupid fights. Like, that's just gonna be a thing. That's the price of free will. But it was definitely not pro-humanity in this one. You had the stories of various people who were either part robot or completely synthetic, and they were looked down on as your basic analogy for people of color or other marginalized identities being looked down on, the prejudice analogy. I didn't know that I necessarily enjoyed, and I'm trying to say this without spoiling too much, although it is only one short story, so you don't know what short story it's going to be. The whole idea of, the child that has very clear autistic coded traits is part robot. Like, that wasn't my favorite thing. but I don't think that was done on purpose. I think that's just, again, a very, very classic trope that's been around in sci-fi for a really long time. Now, I say all this and it sounds really disparaging, but I get why these tropes exist. I get why they're here. Personally, I kind of moved past them. I want a more nuanced take on robots, more nuanced take on aliens. Ironically, one of the most new twists on the alien trope I've seen was in freaking Ice Planet Barbarians. One of the few times where you see the aliens as actually being more farther back in their development than humans. But regardless, this is still definitely a love letter to classic radio dramas, and there was one story in particular that I could say felt more modern. It was basically in a future where all vaccines have been banned and all of the plagues have come back, which was painfully relevant. But there were some just more or less that felt more classically coded than modern. Now, usually when I review sci-fi, I also try to give it a vague rating of, is it beginner friendly, or is it maybe not the best if you haven't done a lot with the genre? This one, I think, would be good for beginners, only because, again, it has a lot of those classic tropes that even if you haven't done a lot directly with sci-fi, you've at least, heard of the Twilight Zone. You've at least heard of War of the Worlds. So you'll probably get a lot of the basic themes and the basic vibes going into this. There's not a lot of super in-depth look at technology and stuff. And while, yes, there are aliens and it gets a little bit alien-y, especially towards the latter half of the collection, it's not too much. There's not really any super gigantic blocks of exposition text trying to describe any science-y things. So if you're new to this genre, this one would probably work really well for you. If you have been reading the genre for a while, these are going to be all things you very instantly recognize, and it's kind of up to your mileage on whether you love these tropes and like seeing them up, or whether you're getting a little bit tired of them like me. But again, because that was such a purely me thing, and because I really, honestly, I prefer most of my sci-fi these days to be queer, and I do have a lot of that on my review list. This was very clearly meant to be a love letter to the classics, so I couldn't really nail it for that. But I did give it 4 stars. A nice little read. I believe it was I think the copy I had was around 130 pages, which is a nice day's read if you're an avid reader, or maybe a day or two if you're not. But regardless, if you're into sci-fi or just getting into it, this would be a good one to check out. I am technically still open to review requests. Still desperately trying to get the list whittled down a little bit, because everything I've accepted on my list right now is heavy. We're working on it. Regardless, I will have all that information on how you can send a review request down in the description below. And with nothing else to say, I hope you have a wonderful day and a marvelous tomorrow.